day 735 of the Trump administration. At the conclusion of this hour, it will be day 35 of the longest ever government shutdown. Nearly 1 million federal workers will miss another paycheck. That means a full month with no income. And look at these pictures and remember what this is not. This is not federal aid from FEMA. This is not disaster relief after a hurricane or a tornado or a fire. This is a food bank, charity in effect, for federal workers, our fellow citizens, public servants who can't afford food for their families. Tonight, the reality of this crisis appears to be sinking in for one Donald Trump and his White House, and the search for the off-ramp may be underway. It was a bad day on the let them eat cake front. And this was just last night. We were on the air on this broadcast when the president agreed to hold off on the State of the Union until the union was up and running again. Well, today in the Senate, there were two votes on competing plans to end the shutdown. One from Trump, the other from the Democrats. Both of them failed. But the Democrats' plan notably gathered more yes votes than Trump's version. 6 Republican senators, Alexander Collins, Gardner, Isaacson, Murkowski, and Romney crossed the aisle to support the Democrats' proposal. That kind of thing can get the majority leader's attention, and indeed, the vote appears to have jump-started talks between McConnell and Schumer, Republicans and Democrats. While those talks were going on, Trump appeared on camera to signal he could be open to some kind of a deal.
Are you open to this idea of the temporary spending measure to reopen the government?
Well, one of the ideas suggested is they open it, they pay a sort of a prorated down payment for the wall, which I think people will agree that you need the wall.
If Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer can come to some sort of agreement, will you support the results of this?
Well, it depends what the agreement is. I mean, yeah, but if they come to a reasonable agreement, I would support it, yeah.
Even if it has no wall money? Or does it have to have wall money?
I only, look, I have other alternatives if I have to.
While people scramble to figure out what a prorated down payment is, tonight our NBC News colleagues on the Hill report Senator Schumer has ruled out any funding for the wall, prorated or otherwise, and Speaker Pelosi called a down payment notion, quote, unreasonable. Tomorrow, Democrats are expected to present a new border security package, but that isn't a sure thing. With this shutdown nearing its 6th week, the strains are starting to come out into the open. Washington Post is reporting some frustrated Republicans read Vice President Pence and Mitch McConnell the riot act during a closed-door meeting, telling him the shutdown needs to end soon. Emotions also spilled out onto the Senate floor today, and this was rare. Please note this exchange between Republican Ted Cruz and Democrat Michael Bennet.
The Democrats are fond of using the phrase hostage-taking. They are quite literally holding the men and women of the Coast Guard hostage because they want to win a political victory against the president. Their objective here is have the president back down and have not a single mile of border wall built.
These crocodile tears that the senator from Texas is crying for first responders are too hard for me to take. They're too hard for me to take. Because when the senator from Texas shut this government down in 2013, my state was flooded. It was underwater. People were killed. People's houses were destroyed. Their small businesses were ruined forever. How ludicrous it is that this government is shut down over a promise the President of the United States couldn't keep.
The Trump administration is coming under fire not just for the shutdown, but what many see as an appalling and obvious lack of empathy for the hundreds of thousands of federal workers not being paid, and a failure to understand the real-world impact of being furloughed. There was this today from White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow.
As soon as this thing goes, the switch will be turned on, the payments will be made, we will go back to normal. This is just a glitch. I don't think I'm out of touch. I'm addressing the problem. I mean, I've met with my individual staff members, and God bless them, they're working for free. They're volunteering.
How are they volunteering? How are workers who've been recalled without pay volunteering?
They're coming to work, they're showing up.
That's not volunteering if you're forced to work without pay and if you don't show up, you lose your job. So that's not volunteering. That's not what volunteering means.
They do it because of their love for the country and the office of the presidency and presumably their allegiance to President Trump, but whatever, they're doing it. Give them some credit.
Then there are the comments from Wilbur Ross, the Commerce Secretary, who's been called the king of bankruptcy in the business world because of his record of buying broke companies and because of his great personal wealth. Ross was in the news not long ago for a pair of $600 velvet slippers he apparently customized, as one does, with the logo of the Commerce Department. Here is what Wilbur Ross said on live television on CNBC this morning.
We've had shutdowns before, albeit for not such a long period as we've been thus far. But put it in perspective, you're talking about 800,000 workers. And while I feel sorry for the individuals that have hardship cases, 800,000 workers, if they never got their pay, which is not the case, they will eventually get it.
Mr. Secretary, there are reports that there are some federal workers who are going to homeless shelters to get food.
Well, I know they are, and I don't really quite understand why, because as I mentioned before, the obligations that they would undertake, say a borrowing from a bank or a credit union, are in effect federally guaranteed. So the 30 days of pay that some people will be out, there's no real reason why they shouldn't be able to get a loan against it.
This afternoon, the president was asked about his Commerce Secretary's remark and offered up this explanation.
I haven't heard the statement, but I do understand that perhaps he should have said it differently. Local people know who they are when they go for groceries and everything else. And I think what Wilbur is probably trying to say is that they will work along. And that's what happens in time like this. They know the people. They've been dealing with them for years, and they work along. The grocery store. And I think that's probably what Wilbur Ross meant.
Harkening back to the day of the corner grocery, let's bring in our lead-off panel for a Thursday night. Tamara Keith, White House correspondent for NPR. Tim O'Brien, executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion. He also happens to be the author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. And Nancy Cook, White House reporter for Politico. So, Tamara, tell us about the effect of these test votes today. As we said earlier, there's nothing like watching, figuratively, Republicans walk across the aisle to join Democrats to get the attention of the majority leader, ergo the West Wing as well.
Right. These test votes were test votes that they knew would fail, but the president had worked really hard to keep Republicans in line. He had this meeting at the White House on Wednesday with conservative leaders, conservative movement types, and had really pressed on them to get their people to call their senators to make sure that people stayed in line, that senators stayed, supported the president's position, that they didn't stray. But then you get 6 Republican senators voting for the Democratic bill. What that says is not just that they voted to reopen the government, but they also voted to reopen the government without funding the wall. And that sent a big signal. The president tried to downplay it in his remarks to reporters, but you can't downplay the fact that 6 members of his own party walked across the line.
Nancy Cook, I read your stuff. I know you have the best words. Can you put into words the pressure on Donald Trump right about now?
Well, there's just a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, the White House really is desperate for an exit strategy at this point. Polling has consistently shown that the majority of voters in numerous polls are holding the Republicans and Trump responsible. And we really saw Trump do an unusual thing over the last 24 hours. He has backed down. He decided that he wasn't going to try to hold the State of the Union this coming Tuesday at the House of Representatives, as was planned. And then even today, he admitted he said that he would accept a short-term funding bill, potentially if there was some wall money in it. That is a huge concession for him on 2 things, and something that he never normally does.
Tim O'Brien, also a good word user, an enthusiast. I want to talk about empathy, and I want to read you a portion of the Washington Post reporting. This is about the words we just saw from Secretary Ross and Larry Kudlow today. The twin appearances underscored a tone deafness that has become more pronounced in the Trump administration as the plight of approximately 800,000 federal workers worsens. Trump has made no appearances at area food banks or other gathering places for furloughed workers, nor has he used the bully pulpit of his office to spotlight their basic struggles. What are we learning and seeing about Donald Trump that you learned and saw long ago in your reporting?
Well, he's an affluent man who was born into wealth, and he doesn't have an authentic connection to the struggles and the needs of average people. We saw that when Puerto Rico got hit by a hurricane. It took the president a long time to go to a war zone. He didn't get out to California when the wildfires were burning, and now he's shut down a government, and the people who work for him are struggling, and he doesn't have any real understanding or empathy with what that struggle involves. And it's not just Ross and Kudlow, it's members of his own family. Lara Trump, his daughter-in-law, just 2 nights ago said that this is just a little bit of a pain for the people who are going through this. Yes, they can't pay their rent. Yes, they're struggling with their mortgages, but they have to understand that the president's trying. But all three of these individuals don't really have to work for a living. They have income coming in from things besides their jobs, and they don't know what it's like to suddenly be cut off from a job. And I think that beyond the lack of empathy, there's also a lack of strategic sophistication here. They have lost the messaging. Symbolically now, not only has Trump said, as famously as he did in December, I'm willing to own the shutdown, he's also being painted publicly as someone who doesn't care about the impact, the human impact of the shutdown as well. And that's going to live with him, I think, for a long time.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.